We've seen an administration that wants to see the innovators innovate.
President Trump wants to hear from these tech companies and say, how can we make America grow?
America is very much open for business. How do we create new products? How do we manufacture better products? And how do we do it cheaper?
It may end up being that the Middle East is one of the key centers of this future blockchain and AI.
I'm here with Chris Buskirk, co-founder, along with Donald Trump Jr. of 1789 Capital, and with Tom Lee, the chairman of BitMine, a digital asset treasury company. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now, you've been involved this morning as part of a delegation with the Hill and Valley Group, who have sponsored this morning at FII. Tell me why you were here. Does this reflect your own ultimate message to the investment world? Chris?
Yeah, the discussion we had this morning was actually a lively one. It was really, it was good. We had good participation from the audience. Like there were two big messages that we were coming out of our morning session with. One is America's open for business. We are very focused as a country, and we at 1789 Capital are focused as a firm on making sure that we have an innovation-led economy. We in the United States have seen a period of deindustrialization, and we are now entering into a period of reindustrialization that is led by advanced manufacturing and led by technologies that just didn't exist a few years ago. That is what the Trump administration has been trying to advocate for and create a policy and legal framework for. And on the private business side, that's what we're investing in. That's our job every day. We get up at 1789 Capital. We want to find the best American innovators, the best builders that are building the next generation of American prosperity, and we invest in them. And it's going great.
And Tom, from your perspective?
Well, I would echo that. I mean, I think that we are entering a period where there is rapid technological innovation taking place. And I have been surprised at how much of this has been taking place in America. I think other countries really need to sort of take notice because this is really going to drive competitive advantages in the future. And as you know, this race is involving AI, and it's going to be the sort of the next source of economic power.
Just by way of explanation, Hill and Valley, that is Capitol Hill and Silicon Valley, I guess. Do you sense there is a disjunct between them? Are they not speaking on the same sheet? Do they need to get closer together in terms of policy?
I would have answered that question differently 2 years ago or 1 year ago, and there was actually a chasm between Silicon Valley, if we use that as a metaphor for the innovators and the innovation economy in the United States, and Capitol Hill, obviously the center of the legislative branch. And that's why that's something that we have seen that has come closer together. That chasm has narrowed over the past year, where we had now have
since the re-election of Donald Trump.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, we've seen an administration that wants to see the innovators innovate. That wants to, whether it be energy, AI, chips, robotics, space, et cetera, wants to see those people who are working in Silicon Valley, broadly defined, wants to see them be able to go to work, create new companies and new technologies in the United States, but then export those things beyond our borders.
Yeah, I mean, crypto is bringing genuine innovation and making it easier for unbanked people to actually be participating in the economy. A lot of that was stifled under the last administration. But I'd echo what Chris said. Jensen Huang, in a recent interview, said that it's a sea change today because, previously it was impossible to get an audience in Washington if you were NVIDIA or an important tech company. But today, President Trump wants to hear from these tech companies and say, how can we make America grow?
Chris, you have described America as needing new institutions for a new era. What does that mean?
It's a big question, but I think that goes it goes across every domain of American social and political life. New political institutions, new cultural institutions, and new business institutions. The principles that the country was founded on remain exactly what they always were, but we need an update and a refresh. In politics, that meant some of the political organizations that were founded in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which were great for that era, became moribund. There were a lot of think tanks that were created in Washington, D.C. in that era, which were highly, highly effective at the time. They were purpose-built for that kind of post-war American period of hegemony. And then over time, as institutions sometimes do, they just became broken and boring and stopped doing what they were supposed to do. We saw an analog with that in a lot of parts of American business when they stopped innovating, and we're not able to, for various reasons, embrace new technologies, then those businesses just stop growing, or they stop growing very quickly, which meant downstream, and this is where it's really important, downstream they stopped delivering value to people. And that's what a business that ultimately needs to do. It needs to create and deliver value to its customers, to ordinary people. And so now we're seeing this unleashing of all types of creativity across all these different spectrums.
Tom, specifically on crypto, previous administration certainly had concerns about crypto, but so did many regulators around the world too. Tell me about the global outlook for crypto now. Is that whole atmosphere changing?
It is. I mean, I'd say at the core, crypto has proven to be a very credible asset class. In the last 10 years, uh, Bitcoin and Ethereum have been the single two best performing assets that are of size. $1 million put into Bitcoin 10 years ago is $113 million today. It's even outperformed investing in Nvidia. So it's important for regulators to understand that because crypto is global, it's hard to create sandboxes or regulatory regimes that are only applicable to one country. I think the US was trying to do that in the last administration, and that really stifled actually crypto innovation in America.
So are you asking for a global regulator of crypto?
I think there has to be a consensus around what should be regulated within crypto. And I think there's been a lot of voices talking about this, but at the end of the day, uh, you don't. You have to be careful that regulatory motivations from incumbents are trying to stifle or even destroy crypto and the cost savings it delivers. So I think it's important to understand the voices around the users of crypto and the use cases means you want to regulate this properly.
Chris, just to go back to your points about the reindustrialization of America, what kind of jobs, what kind of sectors, what kind of industries will this reindustrialization come from? They can't all be high tech workers, can they?
No, they can't. Not in the traditional sense. I think I would say that, and that's one of the more interesting developments that we're seeing, that we're investing around at 1789. Is people think a lot about, just as an example, AI, which is the model development. There's chips design and chip manufacture. There's the construction of the data centers themselves. So that's the AI industry, just in and of itself as a self-contained unit. But the output and the application of that touches everything. And so what we're seeing now in advanced manufacturing is we're seeing the ability of people to use AI as a tool in other types of manufacturing, so that jobs, for example, that were exported years ago in traditional industries, just manufacturing industries, are now what we're calling advanced manufacturing, because they are AI powered. So there are AI tools that are being used to create what they used to call metal bending products. Now it's precision manufacturing of metal parts that was exported from the United States years ago. That can now come home again because we're able to make the workers much more efficient using tools that were designed on AI.
So this is a second industrial age powered by AI, is it?
Absolutely right. Yeah, and we're just at the beginning.
And Chris, how much do you think this is of shrinking supply chains? Because maybe in the past you wanted to do things overseas, but now you can build a lot of these parts in America.
People wanted to do that for two reasons. They wanted to engage in labor and regulatory arbitrage. It was cheaper to get a labor intensive product made, let's say in China, or it was something that was very dirty, and so you wanted to basically do something, or manufacturing something you couldn't do in Europe or in the United States, and you want to do that in the developing world because they didn't have the environmental regulations. And so it was, some people call it greenwashing. On the labor arbitrage, we're now able to close that gap because the tools that are being designed right now by AI are making the workers 10 or 20 times more efficient. And so as a result, the labor arbitrage just doesn't exist
Okay,
anymore.
but tell me how, though, if we are fracturing global trade with tariffs and other instruments, and global supply chains are becoming strained, lots of the talk here at FI has been about the regionalization of trade and supply chains. How does that help America reindustrialize if it's kind of withdrawing from the global system? Is that right?
Yeah, no, we're not withdrawing at all. In fact, I have not seen in my lifetime, I've not seen more outbound engagement from the United States with other countries. So an example here, and this is what, to Tom's point about the condensation of supply chains, we might make the same product, but it would have had to have been done in 4 or 5 or 6 different countries and then assembled someplace. Under the new regime, you might do it in 1 or 2 places with a much smaller supply chain. That makes it cheaper, which means more people can use it. And it also means that you can then export it with less steps. So the same product gets manufactured, but you don't have to move all the pieces all around the world. And now, so the United States will engage in the manufacture of products at home and the components too, that it might have exported that, but then it can take the finished good product and export that. It's not a lack of desire to trade. We want to do more trade. America is very much open for business. It's how do we create new products? How do we manufacture better products? And how do we do it cheaper so that more people can partake in them?
Tom, tell me about why you're here. What are the opportunities that you see in Saudi Arabia, in the wider Middle East, in the crypto business?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that crypto is really what is going to be in the future a monetary base. So the financial industry is building future products. Wall Street is tokenizing not only just dollars like stablecoins, but equities and real estate. Larry Fink wants to tokenize everything. That means crypto is your sort of base infrastructure. But agentic AI and AI is actually also building on the blockchain too. So I think the Middle East is potentially going to be one of the key centers here because they have access to power, a lot of financial resources.
Energy, you mean? Right.
Energy,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
but also financial capital. That's really what's key to AI, and it's what's key to actually rebuilding Wall Street. So it may end up being that the Middle East is one of the key centers of this future blockchain and AI.
Okay, but it will be as an exporter of capital into American and other Western AI and blockchain sectors, will it?
And maybe not just capital. An AI product is a finished good. So if you have inference and hyperscaling done here, that means the Middle East would be an exporter of an actual finished good, which in the future is really a human worker replacement, right? So they're exporting digital labor instead of human labor.
Final question, same question to each of you. The big theme here in Riyadh, FII 9, is about prosperity. How are your activities, your businesses contributing to global prosperity?
Yeah, it's a question we think a lot about. It was really fundamental to the way we were thinking about things when we founded the firm a few years ago. There are 3 ways that you can increase per capita income. You can create new things. We can increase total factor productivity. That's what we want to focus on doing. That's creating new tools. That's technology. You can increase population. That doesn't increase per capita anything. Or you can steal it. It's plunder. This is the oldest game in the book, right? We don't want to do the latter two. We want to do the first one. And so we're really focused on how do we increase productivity. If you increase productivity, this is what the Industrial Revolution did so well. You had tools where you replaced a horse or a mule with a tractor, and as a result, you were able to farm more goods with less people. That meant that more people had more food. This is exact same concept applies today. So we're investing in companies that do those sorts of things that make people more efficient, which create wealth.
And Tom, how does crypto do this? Briefly, if you would.
Well, one, you need to create abundance, and crypto is a much better mousetrap in terms of delivering financial services. But then the key to prosperity is making it widely available, and crypto is very democratic. Anyone can actually create a wallet. So I think you need both, and that's why crypto is proving to be very abundant.
Thank you both, Chris, Tom.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.